Filler is still a good option. There's a lot of hysteria around fillers, and a lot of people always ask, like, how do celebrities get so full? Or how do they get so distorted? It's because someone won't tell them no.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Tell You the Truth, the podcast where the group chat comes to life. Let's get started. Welcome back to Tell You the Truth. I'm your host, Brittany Sharpton. Our guest today is the incredible Dr. Michelle Henry. She's not just a board-certified dermatologist. She's a game changer, a thought leader, and a force to be reckoned with in the beauty and healthcare industries. From launching her own highly successful practice during the pandemic to pioneering research that addresses the unique skincare needs of people of color, Dr. Henry's impact is nothing short of extraordinary. And let me tell you, her journey is just as inspiring as the work she does every single day. Dr. Michelle Henry is a Harvard-trained, board-certified dermatologist and a fellowship-trained Moss micrographic, reconstructive, and cosmetic surgeon. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She is the founder of the Skin and Aesthetic Surgery of Manhattan. Dr. Henry's research is reshaping the field of dermatology and helping to combat systemic disparities in healthcare. Dr. Henry's journey is one of passion, determination, and excellence that continues to inspire and uplift women, particularly women of color, to pursue their dreams and take control of their health and well-being. Dr. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me. I have been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I wanted to start from the beginning. I read that your journey in medicine began when you were just a child, fascinated by the doctors you saw at the hospital with your mother. So can you just take us back a moment, and what was that experience that lit the spark for you?
Yeah, so my mom is a nurse, and so I grew up with a mom that's an ICU nurse, so she always had her books at home. So I was always really into reading her books and into the science and into grossing my friends out with the pictures. But I was always just really curious and interested in the human body and interested in healing the human body. So I don't know if they have this anymore, but they used to have Take Your Daughter to Work Day. So she took me to work. And we were kind of going through the daily tasks, her daily nursing tasks. And I would see the doctors walking around in their little huddle with their white coats, having very serious, very important conversations. And I couldn't take my eyes off of them. I was so interested. And so it became very clear that that was kind of the direction I wanted to go in. She'd walk me around. I'd kind of linger and try to see what was going on. And so she asked them, hey, can she shadow you? She's really interested. And so they were able to find a little white coat for me and a little stethoscope that was way too long, but it was the coolest moment ever. And that was it. I knew I was going to be a doctor from that moment. I was already thinking about it, but then that moment I felt it, I touched it, and that was it.
So initially you were going to go into oncology, but I guess that was too morbid. So maybe you can explain how the segue from that to dermatology.
Yeah, so there are many paths to me wanting to be a doctor. So even before, when was that? That was when I was about 7. So I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do. And then simultaneously, I grew up with my grand aunt, who was kind of like a grandmother to me. So she was with me from the time I was born until she passed when I was about 8 years old. And so the last 6 months of her life, she knew that she was going to pass. So my family were immigrants from Grenada. She came from Grenada to live with us. And, we didn't have a ton of money. She didn't have health insurance. And we found too late that she had breast cancer. And at that point, there was nothing we could do. Chemo, wouldn't have worked even if we could afford it. The doctor said, there's just not much we can do. I actually remember touching the breast cancer. And now that I'm a physician, I know how large that was, that there was really nothing we could do. Wow. And so the last kind of 6 months of her life, she talked to me about everything. We talked about who to date, what to do, I'm Caribbean. So when she would show up again, so we'd have those kind of conversations. And she was just an amazing, incredible woman with so much foresight and empathy and kindness. And so we decided that I would be an oncologist to save women like her. And so that was the goal. That was my focus. Then I got to med school and started, doing a bit more. I was in Houston, and so I would volunteer at MD Anderson, and then I'd work my way up to do, to shadow and create my own internships before we were even supposed to do that. In medical school, I would spend my free time doing that. And I realized pretty early on that, it just made me really sad. I didn't like the helplessness of, having all of these patients pass. And I'm just naturally an empath, and it took so much out of me. If I knew if I went into it, hats off to everyone who could do it, that it would really take a piece out of my life. I get so close to my patients. It was very hard for me to kind of create that wall where I can be okay when you pass. I remember my very first patient that I actually saw pass in medical school. The attending at the bedside said, "Okay, let's move on to a patient who we could learn from." And I remember being so devastated that he said that. And I saved the sticker from that patient's wristband. There's usually like stickers that we put on the wristband and we reapply it every so often. And I still have it to this day because I thought to myself, this man didn't care, but I'm going to care forever that this person died in front of me. So I wasn't made to watch people die in front of me. I would have a notebook full of wristbands at this time, and that's not reasonable. So my first mentor was actually a Mohs surgeon, which is a skin cancer surgeon. And I really loved it because I could cure cancer. So I kept my promise, right? I could take out the cancer. I could reconstruct the area. And so I learned pretty early on that I had good hands. I was really into the technical aspects of medicine. I was really into the surgical aspects. But my patients are awake, so I can talk to them, which is a big part of my personality as a giant empath who needs to talk to people. So it was perfect for me. I could cure it. I could get that gratification. I could know my patients. I could build those relationships. And so very early on, that was that for me. So I knew I was going to be a Mohs surgeon, but I had to go into dermatology. So it was a subset of dermatology. So before I even loved dermatology, I knew I loved this very specific type of surgery, which also happened to be one of the hardest types of skin cancer surgery to get into. But that was kind of the beginning of that journey.
Oh, wow. See, I learned something new that even all the reading on the internet could not give me. So is that what the MOHS stands
Yeah, so Mohs is named after
for?
Frederick Mohs, who's the gentleman who discovered it. So it's called Mohs surgery in honor of him.
Oh, fun fact. Thank you. Well, I'm glad that you are an empath because I think that still plays a key role in dermatology. And obviously, you have a great eye and the symmetry, and it's an art. So your skin is popping and glowing, and you look just as beautiful as you do on all the stuff that I see. So I wanted to dive into some of the myths, some of the truths. I've heard so many things from salmon sperm to, now this trend trying to downplay sunblock. I know hyperpigmentation is a big deal, especially with women of color. So would you mind sharing, what's probably the most common concern people come to see you about?
There's so many, one of the most common is probably hyperpigmentation. I see a lot of women and men and people of color, black people, all, types of skin types. And so hyperpigmentation is just so prevalent. So I see a lot of hyperpigmentation. I see a lot of acne. I see a lot of hair loss. I could basically have a hair loss center. I have so much hair loss in my practice. And it's actually one of the things that I wanted to go into, but I'm there. We see, I probably see 10 plus hair loss patients a day. So those are probably, in terms of like medical concerns, those are probably my top three. And then for cosmetic, I'm doing lots of fillers and lasers. We also do liposuction, hair transplant. But my bread and butter are kind of the more minimally invasive. So very laser heavy practice, and also the fillers and Botox and that sort of thing.
Okay. And I'm glad that you mentioned the toxins, the Botox. There's like Dysport. I mean, I don't know. It seems like every other year I hear about something else. And I feel like I was so late to the party about 2 years ago. I mean, obviously I'm aging and there's stress and whatever. I'm passing by. I'm like, I'm not looking as refreshed as like some of my friends. And I'm like, okay, life is hard, but it shouldn't be like this. So I used to side eye. Like I always thought that fillers and toxins were for like older white women or celebrities, but I find out that all these people are doing it. Black women too, like in their 20s and 30s and beyond. So I'm just curious, why do you think it has been such a stigma, and how can we change that? Because now, I need I need like a refresh. It's like addictive because I don't know, it's preventive. I love it.
And you asked me what are the myths. And one of the biggest myths is that black don't crack. And I always say, okay, your black may not crack early, but it will sink, it will sag, it will dull, And so, I think that there was this thing that it was only like white women and rich people and celebrities. And we were really scarred from God rest his soul, the Michael Jackson era, seeing all of these bad plastic surgery, all these things that made us feel like, if I even dabble in this area, that means I don't like my blackness. And I like my blackness. So I'm not even going to engage, right? So a lot of people are like, that's not for us. If I do that, I hate myself. And I think that now we've realized that, hey, I can make myself look fresher and younger. I can still preserve my ethnicity. I can highlight my ethnicity, right? I can, we should be able to benefit from all the things that everyone else benefits from. We're all aging, just aging differently. And why is it that, Susie should be able to feel like she looks as good as she feels, but we can't, right? And so I think that that is changing. So many, Black women are in my office that are, on schedule, getting their things, maintaining it, looking natural, trusting that they'll look natural, sending their friends, like living their best lives. Like every time I send Instagram, people saying like, why are all these 40-year-olds looking so good? I'm like, me, it's me. No, it's not only me. It's a lot of us. But that's why, like, we now know that we can do it, so.
So you mentioned laser too. So I know there's still pills, Aerolase, I hear is super popular, but you're always on top of the latest research. You do so many speaking engagements. So can you share what we can do for hyperpigmentation or just to minimize the look of pores, all the stuff that we want to?
There's a ton. I probably have 17 lasers in my office, and each and every one of them is safe for all skin types. I won't buy a laser if it's not, because I treat so many patients of color. So we have many, 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 many options. Aerolose is great. I work a lot with them. I'm actually on their medical advisory board. It's a great laser. What stands out about it, the variety of things that you can treat with it, but also the fact that it has such a great safety profile. So you can use it for, very, very light skin into the deepest, richest, darkest skin. And you can get good results and it's safe. So that's great. I like that for acne. I like it for hyperpigmentation. It's a great, safe laser. I also use a laser called the PicoSure. It's what we call a picosecond laser. And so why that's important is because that laser removes so quickly that it doesn't build up heat. And so it's like fragmenting the pigment so that there's really zero downtime. It's a powerful laser that's really great for like deep discoloration. So I use that a lot. Those two are workhorses for reducing the pore size. I really like the microneedling radio frequency devices for that. Microneedling and radio frequency is a workhorse. I use it for acne scarring. I use it for pores. I use it for tightening of the skin. So we have many, 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 many options. So if you have a concern, there's a way for us to now, no matter what your skin type is, there's a way for us to address it.
So one, there's so many lasers is like a candy I didn't even know about. So are the lasers more of a reactive versus preventative or?
They're both. Some of them are preventive and it depends on how you use it because a lot of it is not just the device, it's who's using the device. Some people will say, I used more if it was awful. And then they have it with me and it's fine. So, the lasers are just a tool and then you use them, how you see fit. So that's why the importance of who's using it, especially in skin of color, is absolutely critical. So you can do, more gentle settings to get more preventive. You can be more aggressive if you actually have a problem. You use certain settings if you want to get tightening, certain settings if you want to just get superficial fine lines. So, we can do it for prevention. There's something we call collagen banking now, where we're just like doing things to stimulate collagen, stimulate collagen, stimulate collagen. And so that's one of the things that I will do with certain lasers is to help people like bank their collagen because we start to lose so much with time. So there's so much that we can do.
I did not know that you can bank your collagen. This is okay. So that's why.
Well, bank, we don't mean it. It's kind of like a play on words. We're not like taking it and saving and storing it for you, but we're helping you build up reserves of collagen in your skin.
Okay, because that's another thing I've noticed with this whole aging process. It's like fat wants to sit in every other area of my body, but wants to be gone in your face. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know what it's called, where it starts to look peanutty sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then like the dark circles, I mean, I have concealer on, but still I was told that I wasn't a candidate to get filler under my eye and they gave me some serum. So how can you help in terms of like, replace the fat loss? And obviously we can't stop gravity. So what do you do?
So, you might be a candidate. I can't see you here. Sometimes you're not a candidate if someone doesn't know how to do the procedure. Sometimes not slander, no slander. But, sometimes that's why it's always good to, get other opinions, make sure that many people are aligned. So yeah, you're right. It's like we start losing fat and collagen dramatically after the age of 30. And once we get into our 40s, once we're in the mid 40s and we're like perimenopausal, it's a precipitous decline. So, things that we can do, trying to stimulate that collagen again with those lasers. But when we're getting like those deep depressions under the eyes, the temples, we even start to waste on the cheeks here. Filler is still a good option. There's a lot of hysteria around fillers and a lot of hysteria around migration and all of these other things. Most of the fillers we can erase, right? So even if it does move, we can get rid of it. Of course, we don't want to hang our hat on it and do that all the time, but it's something that we can do. Secondarily, finding somebody who is judicious and not just giving you whatever you want all the time. So people always ask, like, how do celebrities get so full? Or how do they get so distorted? It's because someone won't tell them no. Either that person's aesthetic is off and they don't know, they can't see that it's bad, or they're too fearful to tell the person no. So have someone who is careful and conservative. So I tell my patients, I'll see you in a year. That doesn't mean I'm going to inject you in a year. I'm seeing you in a year to see if you need it, right? Once you get on a schedule where you're like, I do this all the time, there's so many factors that play a role in if your filler goes away fast, if it goes away slow, why'd you hold it a bit longer this year? And so it doesn't mean you're going to need it every year, every time. And that metabolism may change over time and with other factors. So it's really about having somebody who's treating what they see and not keeping you on a schedule just because. And then there are other things if you don't like filler. A lot of people will do PRP. It does help somewhat. It is very subtle at best. A lot of the pictures you see online are like immediately after you injected the PRP. So you see all of the volume that's still there for a few days. But, 3 months down the line, there's barely anything there. But you can get something. It's something I do it too for patients who don't want to use filler, but it's not always a fair trade. And then also there's fat, so sometimes for people who say, I don't want a foreign substance injected into me, we can take fat maybe from the belly or from the back, wherever you have a little bit of extra fat, and we can process, purify that fat and then inject that fat instead. Then you get a long lasting solution, and it is what we call autologous from you. So you don't have to worry about rejection or any of those other problems.
So the PRP, that's when they take the blood and take the white blood cells, or is that something?
Yeah,
okay.
so you take the blood, we spin out the cells, and we're just taking the plasma. And in that plasma, we see, the platelets are there. So we activate those platelets and make them dump out their growth factors, and we're injecting those growth factors into the scalp. I do a lot of PRP for hair loss each and every day. Our machines are spinning like crazy, using it for hair loss, but we also use it for the face. So you can inject it anywhere. You can inject it into the hair, into the face, other specialties, into the knees. I actually just learned recently that our reproductive medicine friends are injecting it into the ovaries for ovarian failure. So, it's something that you can really inject in many places to get restoration.
Okay. So clearly, like you just said, you see at least 10 patients per day for hair loss.
Yeah, at least.
Okay. So I have noticed that my hair is thinning, and I'm like, is this male pattern? Because I'm like, is this from PCOS, or is this just because I'm older? Are the braids too tight? So there's so much, traction alopecia, CCC, something.
Yes.
Can you just share a little bit? There's just so many different things and terms, and every time you look on the internet, I'm like, I don't even know what to believe anymore.
Yeah.
So,
there are many types of hair loss. And so a lot of people come in and they're like, I think I have alopecia. But the word alopecia just means hair loss. So if you see hair loss, indeed, you do have alopecia. But the question is, what kind of alopecia do you have? So then there are two paths you can go down. There's the non-scarring types of hair loss, and then the scarring types of hair loss. And the scarring types of hair loss are based on inflammation. So it's like the immune system, for whatever reason, has turned onto the hair and the scalp and parts of the follicle, and they're attacking it. And that attack causes hair loss, can also cause tenderness, redness, flakiness, burning. So you get more symptoms with the inflammatory types of hair loss. Now, the non-inflammatory types of hair loss are kinds of hair loss conditions, like you said, male pattern and female pattern hair loss, telogen effluvium, which is just shedding, like we saw a lot of that with COVID. So that's going to be in the non-scarring types of hair loss. So the kinds that are inflammatory are typically scarring, right? Some aren't, but most are scarring. So that's kind of where we go. We start figuring out, do you have symptoms? How long has this been going on? Do you have a family history? Is there anything else we can attribute this to? Is it styling? Is it traction from pulling, right? So that's what the dermatologist is there for. You have hair loss, so indeed you do have alopecia. And now it's our job to figure out what type you have and what's contributing to it.
So you do hair transplants too, or?
Yes, we do. I do everything from medical management all the way up to hair transplantation.
But I guess you'll first see if there's something else that you can do first
Yeah,
before
so we
the.
like to, because even if you are a candidate for transplant, a lot
Mhm.
of hair loss conditions, like whatever is causing you to lose the hair, unless it's traction from pulling,
Mm.
sometimes we can't stop it, right? So we need to like medically manage you, do the transplant, and sometimes still keep you on the medicine so we can protect the hairs around the hairs that we transplant. So it's a balance between like the medical diagnosis and then the cosmetic solutions.
It's just so much. It's like, I know people try to make it seem like hair, nails, skin is superficial, but to me, I mean, it affects like my mental health and like when they say when you look good, you feel good, like it's really true. And especially
Yeah.
I find with Black women, like I love changing my hair. I'll wear my natural hair. It's too hot for the wigs, but I love my wigs. But yes, your lace is showing. So, okay, Brittany, stop. Like I can see the little screens in your hair. Like, I don't know, tracks. I just love to change it all. But if I do not take care of the actual anchor that's going to hold these extensions in, I'm like, you are going to be
Yeah.
SOL. So,
Yeah, like protective styles are not always protective. You know, protective styles can get you in trouble real fast if you're not mixing it up, making sure you're paying attention to what your scalp is telling you. Do you have pain? Are you seeing those little bumps if your braids are too
mhm,
tight? We call that tension folliculitis. That just means hair loss is on the way, right? So, like paying attention to all of those things, because the beauty of ethnic hair and kinky curly hair is that all of the fun things you can do, right? But just making sure that all of those things aren't damaging the hair. Because, like you said, if the anchor's gone, what are you going to do then, right?
exactly.
Well, there are things that we can do, but it becomes you lose some of the freedom and fun of styling your hair.
Right. The freedom and the fun. That's exactly what I was trying to articulate. So your edges are so full. Your skin is glowing. Can you
Thank
like share, like, what are some of the secrets? Like, obviously you're a great walking billboard for your practice and the industry, but I'm like, okay, what's
you.
the secret?
So I mean, I do all the things I tell you about. I laser, I Botox, I fill when I need to, you know. But as I get older, I actually do less, and so I do a lot more laser now than injectables. You know, as you get older, your muscles change, and so the way I may have Botox in my 20s, I can't do it now because you get a little older and you need those muscles to keep your eyes open, right? So you can't really freeze things the way you may have when you were younger. So it's all about like listening to your face, and so I do take a less is more approach. I take my hair supplements. I pay attention to my hair. You know, if I'm really stressed, I suffer from alopecia areata. So I'll lose patches of hair if I'm really stressed. And so I really have to make sure that I work and I manage that. I haven't had it in years, thankfully, but there were very scary moments where I'm like,
Mhm.
you know, am I going to lose? How much of my hair will I lose? So when my patient's coming in crying, I understand those tears very well because I've been there. Because it does affect us so much. And I think it affects all women, but I think there is something unique and cultural about our hair with Black women. You know,
Mhm.
there's a lot of weight placed on our hair, and I think it's hard for a lot of people to understand how heavy that can be. So when you're losing your hair, it really, with all women, you know, my white patients feel that way too. But I understand the cultural differences, right, and values around hair and why it can be so triggering and so upsetting to women of color. So that's a part of the conversation. And like you said, dermatology is not just skin, it's psychology. You know, there's so much, like we always say, every dermatologist is also a psychiatrist of some sort because we're psychologists. We're dealing with a lot of that, you know. And then, you know, the skin really tells you so much about your overall health. So we have to understand a little bit of rheumatology, a little bit of infectious disease, a little bit of immunology, because the skin just tells us so much about all the systems that we have to have, you know, a working understanding of so much. So it's definitely far more complex than it looks. And, you know, it's not just superficial for sure.
Right. And it's not just, you see all these memes about drink your water and mind your business and you'll have clear, beautiful skin. Sure, the water helps, but it takes a lot more than that, girl.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I'd be out of business if that could fix it, you know? So, yeah, all the water will not, you know. I've had patients come in drinking too much water, and I'm like, you know, you can hurt yourself from too much water. That can also be a problem, right? So yeah, everything in moderation, and water is definitely not a cure all. Although even my mother still believes that water is a cure all, but you know, water is not a cure all.
Thank you. See, I can drink my gallon of water and still have issues, so don't judge me for going in to see you. Which leads me another thing too, like it seems like a lot of these treatments, or most of them, if not all, are not covered by insurance. But at least for me, and I would think most of your patients,
Yeah.
I don't mind investing in myself. So I look at it like, fine, this is an investment in my mental health. So
Yeah.
what do you say to people who are like, oh my God, this is like a luxurious experience? Like you're paying all this money for laser or injectables, or a lot of these serums that I wanted to get into are very, very expensive. And there's also some, I guess, decent over the counter ones. So what are
You
your
know,
thoughts on that?
well, I say it's about your priorities. Insurance doesn't cover it. Insurance companies couldn't care less how we look, right? And really, they couldn't care less how we feel. They don't really cover mental health
Mm,
services either, right? So
very
they're
true.
lacking in many ways. And so it really is about what you prioritize. I mean, my nails are not the best, but when you do them, nails can cost $100. That's just going to
Easy.
last you a month. So a good serum could last you 3 to 6 months. So I think that's a better investment, right? The skin you're going to carry the rest of your life, right? We don't really shame people if they buy a nice, Chanel bag or something like that, but somehow we're frivolous if we decide to make, an annual budget for our skin that we're literally showing everyone. You take your bag
Mhm.
out on occasion, right? And so it's just about your priorities. And, skin is beauty, but skin is also health. And like you said, it's not even just your physical health, it's your mental health. So I think it is a tremendous and really important investment. And we really shouldn't shame people for wanting to look good. It's the word I hate the worst is vanity, right? Why do we call it vain to want to like look your best and therefore feel your best? And let's also not pretend that these things don't matter in the workplace, in our lives. It's like
Yeah.
we become kind of delusional when we want to talk about those things, but how you feel matters, and it also matters how we're received in spaces. And of course, that is no reason. Judgment of others is no reason to invest in anything, but if it makes you feel better when you present yourself in a way that gives you power and makes you feel empowered, that is a fantastic investment.
Thank you for, not that you had to convince me, but it's like, this reinforced why I'm like, see, you made the right decision. And I read an article, I forgot if it was the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, where there were studies done that people who look better were higher earners, you get promoted faster. I know people may not like that, but I just feel like that's the reality of the
Yeah.
world that we live in, men and women. The
Yeah,
more,
it's hard. Like I always tell people, like, the system is not ideal, but you can't even participate in changing the system until you get to the top. So it's like
that's a
we
good
can be
point.
sad and we can be sad about the rules and we can push against them as long as it's not too toxic. You kind of do what you feel like is best to get to the place where you can make changes, right? But what does my sister say? You can't hate from outside the club. I feel old.
I
Right?
use that reference.
That's what she
Pursue
always
it,
says
yeah.
when they're mean to her about her procedures and whatnot. She's like, no, you can't. But it's true,
Yeah.
So you got to have a seat at that table, and we can change things with time. But it's like by not taking care of yourself in protest, you're making yourself a martyr for no reason, and it feels good to look good. So just join us.
I almost love how refreshingly honest you are. I thought you were going to be like, oh, but no, it's true. This is the
Yeah,
reality of the
but
situation.
there are limits to that, right? Like you shouldn't. I don't believe in like aggressive body changing. Like, of course, unhealthy eating, unregulated eating. There are limits. I'm saying this lightly, kind of like in jest. There are limitations to what we will do to be accepted, but I don't think serum is one of those limitations. I don't think like
Right.
treating your acne marks or treating your hair loss or stimulating some collagen should be where we draw the line. Those things are pretty innocuous. But changing your way, surgeries in dramatic ways, that I would push back against. But the topics we're discussing, I think, are fair game to make you feel good and let you lead with confidence.
With people wanting to feel good and look better, have you seen an increase in filler patients or because of like the Ozempics and the Wegovy's on the market or not
Yeah,
really?
so the whole Ozempic face, Ozempic breast, Ozempic butt, these things are real. All those areas where we like to keep fat, we're losing them. Just like you said, we're already losing facial fat, whether we
Mhm.
want to or not. And so being able to restore that is really meaningful. So, and, once we start to lose that facial fat, that breast fat, that bum fat, it all makes us look a little bit older. We look drawn. We don't have that youthful plumpness. So I'm seeing a lot of that patients coming in to try to restore all of the areas that are becoming saggier and less plump because of the Ozempics, the Wegovy's, all of those things.
Wait, did you say the fun fat?
Oh, I didn't, but I like that.
Oh, I was like, oh,
I
wow.
did the fluffy fat, but yeah, it's the fat that we like,
Right. Like the butt, the breast. I mean, you want to keep the fat there, but hey, I guess we can't pick and choose.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about like the evolution of the field a little bit. You mentioned that there's like 17 plus, probably more. You have all these lasers in your practice. I talked about certain trends that I saw online that I don't know are true or not. Clearly, sunscreen, I mean, there's toxins in food that we eat. I'm sure this water that I have, like the plastic is not good for me, but whatever. So what has been the most like outlandish thing that you have heard, or I don't know, 2 to 3 things that are myths that you want to debunk?
Well, one of them, like as you alluded to, is the sunscreen myth. So, I can't tell you ever. I'm a Mohs surgeon. I have committed my life to fighting and hopefully curing skin cancer. And so that's really near and dear to my heart. We know that UV light is a carcinogen in the same way that we know smoking is a carcinogen, right? And so, with all things, there's a risk benefit analysis that we make. But the risk with sunscreen is very, very low, if not, zero in some cases. So if you don't like the chemical sunscreens, we have mineral sunscreens that we don't absorb that just reflect light. So when people say sunscreen and kind of disparage the entire category, there are options there, right? So if you, for whatever reason, it doesn't align with you to use the chemical sunscreens, which are going to be those ingredients like oxybenzone, octinoctate, homosalate, which are like common ingredients that we see in chemical sunscreens, we have mineral sunscreens, which contain things like zinc and titanium dioxide. And those are ingredients that are like inert. They just live in our skin. We don't absorb them. We see them in our foods, right? And so this pushback on sunscreens is pretty wild because we have a very safe option. I also personally think that the chemical sunscreens, we don't have data saying that they're unsafe. There are 2 ingredients, oxybenzone and octinoctate, that a lot of companies have pulled out. And it's very easy to find sunscreens that don't contain them. For instance, CVS doesn't even carry any sunscreens that contain them. So at mainstream stores, you can find it with those that have triggered the most alarm. But again, if you don't want to use those, we have mineral sunscreens that are very elegant that can match all skin types. So there's really not a strong argument for not using it at this point. Most people don't use sunscreen well enough anyway. So the argument around like being vitamin deficient is not really one either. We really want you to just take your vitamin D with a well-rounded diet and supplements. Exposing yourself to a carcinogen just to get your vitamin D is not the best way to get your vitamin D. So that's probably the biggest myth that really like upsets all of us dermatologists. And it is an active conversation because we do need to have a more nuanced approach. Some people might need sunscreen more than others. We're kind of evolving the way we think, but without data, we're not going to make any strong changes yet. And because we have a safe option, there's really no reason to change what we're doing right now.
But this sunscreen conversation, not to knock any other generation, it seems relatively new. Like I have never heard people saying when they did a cost benefit analysis until maybe the last year. But again, this is more your field, that we're rebelling against sunscreen. Like, when did
Yeah,
this pop up?
it's a little bit of the social media effect. So everyone's doing their research, but I think part of it is that we are now in a world flooded with information, but not education. Our education system doesn't teach us how to read studies appropriately, how to know when a study actually has enough people involved in the study to actually make it applicable to the world, right? Our healthcare literacy is just really crummy. And so in some ways you can't blame people. They've been thrust into a system that they don't trust, they don't understand. They've not been educated on what's not. They're doing their own education, but it's not really grounded in what's real and what's not. On social media, it's really easy to fool people. Like if someone's your friend, you trust them. And now that you trust them with all the things they say, because why would your friend lie to you, right? So it's very easy to really spread information in a very, very scary way. And that's happening rapidly. And then we're also looking at a generation of people who want to have agency over everything. They don't trust anyone. Everyone is the man. And I'm doing my research and I'm taking it into my own hands. And while agency is important, and like hats off to Gen Z for doing that and standing up for themselves, sometimes I think we can course correct too aggressively. We want to make sure that while we're course correcting, all of the trauma that the millennials and Gen Xers and boomers have suffered all these years, I love that they're going to carry that torch and make things different and better. But sometimes we can course correct too far and actually cause harm. And so I think it's just about having that conversation and making sure that dermatologists are at the table to really educate with compassion, because it's not about shaming people who think they're doing the best. Now, some people are really out there, they know they're manipulating people, but I think some people out there really believe they're doing what's best. So we don't want to shame those people. We want to educate with compassion and make sure everyone understands what the real risk is.
That is so kind of you. So speaking of all this information that we can find at our fingertips, Dr. Google, social media, obviously dermatology is your background, but as a badass businesswoman first, who happens to be a dermatologist, you have built this incredible brand. You launched your practice in the heart of a crazy pandemic. We were talking about mental health and looking good, but it has to be, I'm assuming, a lot of weight and pressure. People like myself, they look at you like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. She's so accomplished. She's just doing all these things. She's just glowing, glowing, glowing. So I feel like you have to not only present as CEO and a business owner, but as this online influencer. And obviously you have a personal life. So like, how do you keep it all together and continue to show up not only for your patients, but for yourself and your inner circle?
Sometimes I do it really well and some days I do it really poorly. But I think what's important is just to kind of like give yourself grace and keep your eye on the prize, right? Always knowing that, it sounds trite, but you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So checking in with yourself. And part of starting my own business was also doing that while I work harder. Peace of mind is priceless, right? I'd rather work, 32 hours a day for myself than being in an environment that doesn't understand or wants to, suppress my growth or won't let me grow and protect my patients in the way that I feel is important. And so, that freedom was really a huge part of my mental health and positivity in my life. Having that freedom and flexibility to not only care for myself, but my patients in a way that I felt respected both of us, right? So being able to have that agency for your life is really important. So sitting down and thinking about what is important to you. I'm lucky that that decision was also financially good for me too. So I do enjoy business. I love business building. I enjoy all of the parts of business, right? And so it was, and that I did know about myself. My mom always laughs that I had my first job when I was 8. I made a landscaping company in my neighborhood, and then I hired other kids, and I would take, and before I knew anything about business, I knew that I was supposed to take a little bit of their money because I was the boss, right? So I very early on knew that I was probably pretty good at business. And so it came really naturally to me. But it really is just about, the freedom to pause when I need to pause. And also the freedom in giving yourself the grace to pause, the grace to make mistakes. I think a lot of us that are like high achievers and type A, most of us are, right, that are in this space. I imagine you're running this podcast, so I kind of know that about you without even talking to you. I'm sure that's your personality, right? And one of the hardest things for us to do is to let ourselves fail. And of course, it's not just failing completely, but sometimes those mini failures are too much for us even, right? Mm-hmm. And so letting yourself be human and learning to grow in it, right? And so it's funny, I just started doing yoga, and I'm not a yogi at all, but one of my good friends, she's a big time yogi, and I could never get into it. And I was doing it just for working out, right? And I wasn't really doing it for the mental health aspects. And then a few months ago, I called her up and I was like, I get it. I get why you like yoga. She's like me. And I said, you like it because it's a moment where you can let yourself fail and trust the process, right? And so that's kind of what it is giving yourself grace to get better and trusting that in that you'll get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I think part of my mental health is giving myself grace to grow, giving myself grace to fail, and then trusting myself that I can then try, because if I fail, it's okay, right? I've done this before. I can give myself grace to do it again. So I think that's all about like being kind to yourself in every way. And then also not being afraid to spoil myself. I don't share everything about myself online, but I definitely take care of myself. I take fantastic vacations. I love to travel. I love to spend time with my loved ones. I love to laugh and be far sillier than anyone would ever think I can be. So giving yourself grace in all the areas to just be whoever you are authentically.
Now I'm going to get into some more like a fire round kind of surprising parts about Dr. Michelle. Let's see. So you did say you like spoiling yourself, as you should. So what are some other, like, do you have any like guilty pleasures or some certain reality shows that people would never expect you to be
What do I
into?
do? So I used to, I don't get to watch a lot of TV anymore. Oh, but I do have a different guilty pleasure. So I used to like the Housewives franchise. That used to be my thing once upon a time, but no time anymore. But I love TikTok. I'm a TikTok head. I was one of those people, and they were like, take Teams, not TikTok. When the government was trying to take TikTok, I was like, I felt that deep in my soul, right? So I am definitely like a social media girl. I like seeing what the people are doing. I like seeing what these young girls are doing. I like all the college rush. I like to hear all the things. So I definitely consume a fair amount of social media. I love restaurants. I'm actually going to dinner right after this. I was supposed to travel this weekend. I didn't. So I'm actually glad that I'm here. So this is one of the few holiday weekends where I am just laying low. I'm going to stay this weekend. I'm going to fix my office. I'm going to walk around my neighborhood that I can barely recognize because I'm never here. So I will be here. But another guilty pleasure, unlike this weekend, is I like to travel. So most holiday weekends I'm traveling somewhere. I like to shop. I do shop a lot. That's about it. Just like spending times with my friends. Like I chat with my friends all the time. We probably face each other at work 3 or 4 times a day. So I just love community, and wherever I can find that, whether it is like throwing a party at my house or helping my friends throw a party at their homes. I just love community, and wherever I can get it, I love to kind of dive right in and enjoy it as much as I can.
So you love all the fun stuff that I love too. I mean, luxury travel, shopping. I mean, but obviously you have afforded yourself the lifestyle that you can do this. So I find nothing wrong with it. The fact that we're calling that a guilty pleasure also speaks to, I think it's a lot of self-critique that in combination too with what society says, like, oh, you shouldn't.
It's only guilty if you don't work hard, right? We work hard, so you should feel not guilty about it all. If you feel guilty about it, you might want to like reconsider your priorities. But if you're working hard, you should never feel guilty about what you've earned and what you're using responsibly.
You have so many great one-liners that I feel like putting on a shirt. It's true. From fun fat, that was my part too. Right. If you feel guilty about it, then maybe you should reconsider if this should be a pleasure right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So we obviously know you're a super highly educated woman, very accomplished. I know that you do a lot of traveling. You love community. You're going out to eat after this. So are you reading any books that are non-medical journals right now?
I am. I try to read a fair number of books. Actually, let me look at my list. So right now I'm reading Outlive by Peter Attia. I just started that. I'm kind of flipping through an old book. I guess it's not so old, but The Psychology of Money. I'm looking at, it's an old book. It's a fiction book, but I'm interested in this idea of, it's called A Gentleman in Moscow. It made Obama's list a million years ago, but it's this guy who ends up having to live his entire life in a hotel room. And it's this idea of like, the mind could be a heaven or a hell depending on what you do with your mind, right? So it's that kind of idea.
I've heard of The Gentleman of Moscow, but it just didn't pique my interest. But you said it was...
It's long, but it's good. It's well done. And now it's on Netflix, so you could skip it. I think I just heard they did a Netflix series on it.
I may take the lazy non-type A girl way and do that. Okay, Dr. Michelle, if you were to win the lottery tomorrow, what is the first thing that you would buy?
An attorney and an accountant. I would get a better attorney and a better accountant to help me manage all of that. It's interesting. I don't have a lot of material things that I want immediately, right? What I really want is my freedom and my time. So I would find someone to manage my money so I can have all of the freedom and time that I want. I would definitely get an amazing house on the beach somewhere. That would be one of the things. But yeah, I don't, honestly, I'm happy. I don't have a ton of material things that I'm like, oh, if I just had this, happiness would come.
Right.
I would just be happy to have like my freedom, more time with my family. And I'd get a really nice beach house because I love the water.
And maybe I missed this, but it seems like you're such an entrepreneur, a business baddie, clearly an expert in your field. But there's no skincare line yet, or is there? I feel like that's the natural.
I definitely have my my hands in lots of interesting projects. that I may be able to share in the future at some point. But
Okay.
I definitely have visions to bring something new and innovative. And part of why I've not done anything yet on my own is because, you know, there needs to be some new technology. There needs to be something new and fresh to bring into the market. I don't want to just do like a lot of people will just white label and they put their name on it. I absolutely will not do that. If there's a product with my name on it, it is not a product that someone just made and I'm branding. It's going to be something new. I've talked to the chemist. We sat in the lab together. It is something new. And there are some really cool things out there that I hope to bring forward at some point soon. So maybe someday you will see it.
You heard it here first, because I kept Googling. I'm like, I know, like, she's the prototype. Like, if you were my consulting client, I'm like, hello, where's this line? Like, it would sell like hotcakes, but it makes sense. White labeling, no shade to anyone else that does that, is clearly a much easier path than innovation. So
Yeah.
there's still so much time.
Yes.
And to wrap, this has been like so wonderful. How can people who want to learn more about you and follow you online, how can they find you?
So you can find me, I do a lot of Instagram, Dr. Michelle Henry on Instagram. My practice website is skinandaestheticsurgery.com. Everything's linked from my Instagram. That's probably the fastest way to find me. Me and my team are answering it at all times. So we'll answer questions there. And you can book directly on the website. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm there. I'm responsive. It is me. I am looking at every question. So I am responsive, and you can reach me at any of those platforms.
Well, this has been super fun. You are so down to earth, so knowledgeable. Like, I felt like at first, admittedly, I was like, oh my gosh, I get a chance to like talk to like Dr. Michelle from online. But yeah, I feel like we are gonna walk to dinner together. Like, I'm kind of jealous I'm not a part of the crew. I don't know. But thank you again. This was super informative. And I definitely, like, I always try to find an excuse to go back to New York. I miss living in Manhattan. So I will have to stop by and get something, because like you said, you can't tell through the webcam. I may be a candidate because you actually know what you're doing.
I'm happy to see you. Happy to give you a second opinion.
Thank you so much, and have an excellent long weekend. And I hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for tuning in to Tell You the Truth. If you connected with today's conversation, please share, subscribe, rate, and review. It helps us grow this incredible Truth Tribe community. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts and follow on social media for the latest updates. Until next time, keep it real and keep showing up for yourself. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.